with sensory processing disorder. Sometimes my condition makes me feel isolated from other people, but sometimes I find unexpected connections. My guest today is Maxwell DeMarco, and like him, I too have a disorder that is diagnosed on a spectrum. Sensory processing disorder can be a very minor disease, and it can be a very major disorder. There are 5 senses, and sensory processing deals with how your brain processes the input from each of those 5 senses. And it doesn't necessarily process that input quickly enough, and so it can be very overwhelming. For me in particular, I have trouble with my sense of touch. Clothing can bother me. Different types of pressure bother me. I like some pressure, I don't like other types of pressure. Food bothers me. I am very much what somebody would be called picky, because there are foods that just, I can't stand the taste of them and often the smell of them, to the point where that makes me gag. And then there are things like hearing, minor tapping noise may be almost imperceptible to somebody, but that tapping noise can just overwhelm me over time. So there's a spectrum with how, since I have sensory processing disorder and how somebody else might have it. They may have it more mild than I do. It may be more major than I have it, where they cannot function on a day-to-day basis. But Maxwell doesn't live with sensory processing disorder. He lives with autism. Thank you for coming, Maxwell.
Thank you for having me.
Can you describe autism in your own words?
Autism is, I would say would it be too cocky to say that it's a bit of a heightened awareness of the world? But I've always noticed that I'm more, I know for a while my generation was kind of defined by this aspect, but even today though, I still find myself kind of questioning basic human nature, why we do this sort of thing. It's I kind of have to I'm kind of learning what it's like to be normal as I grow up. That's not to say I wasn't normal before, but I feel the more I interact with the real world, aka outside of my comfort zone, the more I become more comfortable with myself. So it's kind of a learning experience, so to speak. Once I started interacting with more people, I became more confident. I didn't have to put on a front to be all smiley and stuff. I genuinely started having fun conversations, and I didn't feel awkward. I'd say being autistic is not really an uphill battle. I wouldn't go that far, but it is I think it's most defined by what I look how I grow as a person. It's growing from when I first was able to speak to who I am today.
How do you feel autism affects you in today's society?
I would say that there is a very big prejudice against people who are on the autism spectrum, which I do not think is right to do, because no one, no matter which side of the spectrum you are on, and there is a spectrum, no one on the autism spectrum is stupid. They're all just some of us, we process things in a different way, and sometimes maybe we aren't able to communicate. But I want to stress one thing. My memory is not always perfect, but I remember vividly when I was 3-5 years old or so, my parents told me that I couldn't speak, but I distinctly remember not only hearing but comprehending what was going on. When I was 3 years old, I fell and I cut my lip. And when I was in the operating room and they were putting me under, I remember being actually scared. I remember being oh my gosh, what's happened? Why am I bleeding from my lip when I first fell and cut myself? I remember when I was 5, on a lighter note, I remember the first time I heard school. And they were talking about starting school. I was like, school, or even, I don't know what that is, even now I don't like it. And I'm serious. But like, just because someone further on the spectrum isn't able to communicate does not mean they're stupid. And people who lean more towards my side of the spectrum actually are pretty much, aside from like, that constant, like I said, that like learning part of our lives, we are like pretty much just normal people. Like at the most, we're like a little bit awkward, but it's not, we're doing our best. So I don't think it's like right to say to like use autistic as like a stand-in for cringy or stupid, because that's not the case. Like no matter where you are, it's not. And as someone who really is, trying to be the best person he can be, to have to live with people using this word and there really being no effort to stop this, I think that's the biggest struggle I have to deal with. I'm a fast learner, so again, that part of my life has been pretty straightforward, and plus I have references as how I'm supposed to act, all that jazz, but I think the hardest part is just these stereotypes that come with my condition.
So, as you mentioned, autism is a spectrum, and it goes from, I guess, what you call light autism to completely nonverbal. Mm-hmm. How do you feel like people should adapt how they interact with each level, and what makes each level more comfortable?
Well, it really does vary from person to person. And I have had like experiences with many different people who are like on various parts of the spectrum. Some of them who are even, I believe, more high functioning, so to speak, than I am. But it really depends from person to person. For instance, in my case, even with my more social outlook on life these days, I do get overwhelmed with like more like bombastic personalities. Like if you're being loud, joking with your friends, often I will just kind of like reserve myself, just be like, okay. One thing I want to stress is don't be put off by stimming. So that's like, for me, it's like if I'm scratching, for other people it might be doing this, like just kind of tapping on their lap. It doesn't like mean we're bored, it's just something that we do, and honestly it's usually to help us just like focus on what you're saying. It's not like to distract us from what's going on. It's just more like just to like keep like our awareness up so we can like listen to what you're saying. So it's not like we're drumming our fingers like we're bored. And it's important to, and yes, that also is like a stress mechanism. So, don't assume that we're being rude, just assume that, depending on the context, either, okay, maybe, and usually if it's a stress maneuver for me, it's actually when I'm not being talked to. So maybe if you notice me, for instance, me doing this, then I would be like, okay, maybe we should tone it down a little bit, or if you're talking to me, then just ignore it and move on. Now, in the case of me, like my scratching can kind of be a problem, but I don't expect you to like step in. On the other, now, for other people on the spectrum, I'd say it's best to keep things simple. Like, I have not really had any interaction with people who are on the completely nonverbal side, but I've met people who maybe they're not not quite as like mature per se as I am. And that doesn't mean you have to talk down to them or treat them like a kid. It just acknowledge that, they might not be able to like come to a conclusion as quickly as you, and just go at their own pace. Like see what they can, hang out with them, see what they can process, and adjust to that. I think learning to work with people like me would help not only us, but help people understand us more.
Do you find that you have any anxiety around upcoming social interactions, or do you enjoy the social interactions?
I have always had a fear of social interactions. I try to be as what's the word, extroverted? as I can, but at the same time, if it's like a premiere, I can't just like walk up to somebody and start like chatting them up. I'll usually wait for someone to talk to me. Often I'll be doing my own thing off in the corner. When it's expected of me, especially in like situations like the youth group I co-run with my sister, Create For You, that time I'll often like engage in conversations. But if it's like a premiere and there's like other people, or like people older than me or like other kids that I don't really know. Usually, I'm not the one to just like start a conversation. I will like go back and forth with you if you like strike a conversation with me, and I'll be totally fine with it. But like, don't expect me to just be able to like, after we're done talking, just suddenly come up to me and be like, hey, and I won't go, hey. But basically I try my best, but there is. No matter how outgoing I become, there always is that like underlying anxiety, and that is something I do believe that people like me do have to deal with. So even if we're not like a little like socially awkward per se, we do have to. That is something we have to overcome.
So you talked about stimming. Do you have control over it, or is it kind of like an unconscious thing you do, or?
Well, actually, I've been doing it unconsciously as we're talking. So, and again, it's like something that I kind of like do in the background to help me focus on what I'm saying, what we're talking about. So, but however, that's not to say it's completely unconscious. In fact, often if it's like, I'll do it if I have nothing to do, and that is more like a conscious thing. And again, that's not very good for me, but for like other people where it's just like tapping their leg or whatever, I can see why they do it. It's like something to like occupy their time. I've always had a hard time like staying like completely still, and I think that's like a good like thing that people do like when they're trying to think. So the answer is sort of yes and no. It depends on the situation.
What do you want people to know about autism?
I cannot stress more that people on the autism spectrum, one, we are not stupid, and two, we are trying our best to learn how to be more like you. And I think what I want people to know is you shouldn't try to, it's important to work with us here. You know, we're not, despite the stereotypes you'll see online, like, just because there's some kid being bratty does not mean he's on the spectrum. In fact, again, like I said, most people on the spectrum are way more introverted. But we're trying our best, and we really do want to be, we want to be friends with you. And that's not to say we're just going to suddenly walk up and be like, hey, how's it going? No, I don't mean that like literally, but we're trying to integrate into everyday life as best we can. And I think the most important thing is don't talk down to us if you meet someone who is on the spectrum, and just try and work at our own pace. Like, the more you get to know us, like, adjust yourself to that. That's something I do naturally, and I think if more people learned how to do that, I think a lot less of these negative stereotypes would exist today.
So, I know people with autism also tend to have other things going on. Can you talk about other things that are like body and disorder-wise that go on with you?
Absolutely. Well, for one, I've always had a wide range of allergies, pollen, all that jazz. So it should come as no surprise that I also live with asthma. However, asthma is not, I've never had, I don't know, but I've never really been self-conscious about it. Like, whenever sometimes it's a problem if I like sprint, like back up the driveway after taking down the garbages or whatever. But usually if I just take it slow, it's not so bad. Like, usually if I want to walk, I'll hardly have to do it. And even if I do sometimes, it's just a quick puff and it's done. I don't feel ashamed about it or anything. Again, there isn't like a stereotype for asthma as there is for like autism. So it's easier to cope with. One thing that is harder though is the other thing I have, which I believe currently has been diagnosed as hyper-IG syndrome, which basically is how my personal method of stimming got started. It basically makes my skin itchy to the point where I actually break the skin. And I know that's something that, sometimes happens with people from time to time, but for me it is a frequent thing. And the problem with it now being tied to my stimming is that often I'll scratch to the point where I actually lose limb mobility, and that has impacted my life almost as much as autism. I feel self-conscious about how my skin looks. Sometimes my skin can get so dry that I don't want to get up in the morning, but I have to because I have to take my bath and my shower, and that in and of itself, I do take a bath because I have to fill it with I believe 4 half tablespoons of apple cider vinegar or bleach and mix it into the water so that my skin does not get infected. So that is something that has definitely affected my life, and it does make things harder. It does, coupled with my natural nervousness around people in public. It is something that does not exactly help with staying confident, and putting myself, in social situations.
Do you find it hard to read intentions of other people or know the tenor of a conversation?
I do. I find the way I often read someone's intentions is by the tone of their voice. So, and I'm not blind to sarcasm, but often if you sound irritated, I'll take you at face value that you are irritated. And I think people on the autism spectrum are going to have different ways of determining how someone is feeling, and that's just again another thing I have to live with. I'd say the best thing to do is again learn how we see what each of us deduce what you're feeling and work around that. It is something I've tried to work around personally, but I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon, and really I just try and be as alert as I can.
Is there anything else that's particular to your level of autism that would be interesting to know with learning or?
Well, learning has been pretty normal, but I think one thing that is worth noting is that at my level, where my autism basically would come across as just me being a little introverted, it is important to know that I'm probably not going to sympathize with you if you are being much more. I don't want to. This is gonna sound weird, but more of a stereotypical person. If we're sitting at if we're in Create for You and there's I don't know, some girls walking by and you say, well, those girls look pretty hot. I'm not gonna be yeah, dude. It's probably I'll probably just be yeah, sure. Cause I have had time to see how this sort of behavior goes down, and I've had time to form my own decisions before coming into the world. So chances are that I'll probably have a serious aversion to how someone would usually act. Because as someone who knows what the stigma is for people on the spectrum, and am trying to do my best to be, a good person, I'm probably not even going to engage in that sort of thing jokingly. I'll probably be much more sensitive to that sort of thing, and I just all around take into account what I've had to go through,
So if you were at a public place and there was a child there that was interested in you, would you welcome the parents to have the child come talk to you about what's going on with you, or?
I might be a little self-conscious about that, honestly, because paying attention to how I behave would be important in like being my friend, but I wouldn't consider myself like just someone you can just come up to and start talking to me. Like that feels a little insensitive, honestly.
So what would you have the parent tell the child?
I would probably just have them treat me as though I was just a slightly like a stand-up person who looks a little not in the norm, and just say it's not polite to stare and have them move on. Because I don't think I come across like just standing in a place as being on the spectrum. Honestly, I don't think anyone does. You'd have to get to know me to learn about that. And I guess, and if I don't really know you and you're suddenly interested in my condition, then I don't know. I think that's something you'd have to know me a bit better for me to open up on.
Okay, thank you very much for coming and talking about autism.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Connection. I hope that these conversations show everyone that no matter what we face, no matter what differences we have, we can find common ground. Ultimately, we're all connected.